Hello music fans, now that February is over, it's time for me to count down my top 10 favorite metal, rock, and progressive albums of February 2023. If you're a prog music fan, you'll want to stick around to the top 5 because they're more on the prog side. Number 6 through 10 are less proggy, but some more on the metal side. Let's kick it right off with number 10, which is Insomnium and their album Anno 1696, and this is melodic death metal. It's the 9th album by this Finnish band. If you're a fan of bands like In Flames and Winter Sun, you'll like this. It kind of sounds like those two bands combined to me, but darker and more brutal, mostly harsh vocals, but there are some clean moments as well. As one track features a guest female vocalist who sings well as well. And number 9 is In Flames, who I just mentioned, kind of one of the pioneers of the Swedish melodic death metal sound with their album Foregone. This is kind of a mix of their melodic death metal sound with their later alternative metal sound. They do have some metalcore influences as well. It's their 14th album, and their later works have been more alternative metal, but the early singles they released from this album sounded more like their old work, which is more in the melodic death metal style that most of their hardcore fans, I think, like that older sound more. I actually am unusual with my taste for In Flames. I like their alternative metal sound a bit more than their classic melodic death metal sound, even though I do respect all their albums. This was one of my top 5 most anticipated albums of 2023. Sorry, not of the whole year, but just of the first quarter of 2023. And it was a pretty good listen. It had some songs in their older style, some songs in their newer style, some metalcore, some pop influences with the clean vocals, really catchy anthemic choruses. The guitar solos on the album are solid. So it's a good album, but also hard for me to be that excited by it. I'm still not sure if it'll stand the test of time as I continue to listen to it. So I think I pretty much decided it's basically just a Standards In Flames album, and I probably won't choose to go back to it as much as some of their others that I like better. My number 8 album of February 2023 is by Thrice, and it's The Artist in the Ambulance Revisited. This is post-hardcore. It's their 12th album, but it's actually just a re-recording of their 3rd album from 2003 on its kind of 20th anniversary. Not sure how I feel about them spending their time doing this, because that 2003 album is my favorite album they ever made, and they really just re-recorded the same songs again. Dustin's harsh vocals have gotten less powerful over the years. They toned down the screams and aggression a bit. The production's a bit better on this newer version. It sounds a bit more like Thrice than the older album does, but the original had more of a metal production to it. I heard they didn't like that production very much, but I think even the clean vocals are better on the original, as well as the screams are better on the original. And the original album is probably in my top 5 albums of 2003, but I'm not sure if I'll even end up putting this revisited remake on my top 40 of this year by the end of the year. The instrumental performances on here are great. They brought in some interesting collaborators on different tracks, but if I want to hear these songs, I'll stick to the original, even though this is still interesting to hear. So if you're a Thrice fan, still a good listen. Just to hear different alternative takes on existing songs, but I'm more looking forward to hearing new material. I think they have some upcoming material coming on a Horizons West album, so I'm more excited for that. Number 7 is All My Shadows with their album Eerie Monsters. This is hard rock with heavy metal influences, and this is a debut album of a new band that features 2 members of the German prog metal band Vandenplas. The album itself is not really progressive. Instead, it's more melodic and catchy hard rock with some heavy metal influences thrown in, kind of like Iron Maiden meets Journey. I didn't really expect to enjoy it as much as I did, but it is undeniably great. It's just so catchy. The guitar riffs are nice. They're memorable. They have cool pinch harmonics in them. They have intense guitar solos reminiscent of the 80s. It's probably the best traditional hard rock album I've heard so far this year, and that's pretty unexpected because there were some solid releases from bands like the Winery Dogs, Uriah Heep, and Steve Vai, but I actually think this is catchier, more memorable, contains better riffs, and more memorable guitar solos than all of those. My favorite track from this is the opening track, Silent Waters. On to number 6, which is Half Me and their album Soma. This is the debut album from this German band. I heard one single beforehand. It had a good mix of heavy riffs and screaming with catchy hooks and singing. And when I listened to the whole album, I realized this is the breakdown and mosh pit album of the year so far. If you're a fan of early 2000s metalcore but want to hear something like that but with more of a modern edge, this is a good album for you to check out. Now we're entering the top 5 so we can start talking about the proggy stuff. Number 5 is We Came From Space with their album Overlords, and this is progressive rock. It's the third album from this American band. Thanks to Nathan on Shuffle for making me aware of this release. This features Bill Hubauer, who used to be in the Neil Morse band, on keyboards. And my favorite track was the title track, Overlords. If you're a fan of the Neil Morse band, you'll like this. It's got accessible, catchy, and poppy moments and hooks, but it's interspersed with a lot of wild, proggy interludes. Number 4 is Zopp with their album Dominion. This is progressive rock with jazz fusion influences. They play kind of in the Canterbury scene style of prog rock. This is their second album, and they're from the UK. And I'm glad I heard about this from the Rhyme Signatures channel after he reviewed that on his channel and put it on my radar. A lot of moments on this album are heavily instrumental and jazzy, but there are also some moments with vocals and some rocking moments too. My favorite track on here is You, which is an 11-minute mini epic that has vocals, but they only really kick in after a lengthy 3.5 minutes of instrumental intro. Number 3 is eMolecule with The Architect. This is progressive metal, kind of maybe progressive rock rather than metal, because it's some parts are metal, but some parts really aren't. They've got a lot of electronic, pop, and ambient and post-rock influences in here too. The debut album, this is a debut album by 2 former members of Sound of Contact, and those members are Simon Collins, son of legendary Phil Collins, and Kelly Nordstrom. And it sounds very cerebral, hypnotic, reminiscent of Tool, but without as much metal bite. The catchy vocal hooks remind me of the band Ghost, but it's got more ambient, proggy rock to it. Really solid debut album for this group. I'm looking forward to hearing what they do next. My favorite tracks are The Architect and Beyond Belief. And some of the tracks on this album are super atmospheric and not metal at all, but some of them have quite the metal edge to them. You kind of have to listen to the whole album all the way through to get the full variety of this band's sound. My number 2 is Klone with their album Meanwhile. This is progressive metal. Again, not super heavy progressive metal, so it's kind of bordering between progressive metal and progressive rock like the last one. And it's also got that post-rock influence there too. It's the 7th album by this French band, and while the band is from France, the lyrics are in English. I heard one of the early singles before the album got released. The vocals sounded great, so I put it on my list. And I like that this band's not too genty. They sound more like early 2000s alternative metal and nu metal with their guitar tone, but they bring in a lot more atmosphere and ambience than most of the bands in those scenes. If you're a fan of Tool, Deftones, The Ocean, but imagine those bands bringing in more atmospheric ambient post-rock or post-metal influences like Sigur Rós and Cult of Luna. that's kind of, you mix those together, that's kind of what this sounds like. Although really accessible vocals, like I could almost hear some of these catchy choruses being radio friendly. It's hard to pick a favorite track on here because they're all pretty solid, but one that I find the catchiest and that I remember the most is Bystander, even though it may be one of the less complex and more traditional songs on the album. And now my number one album of February is by the band Hypnos, which is spelt Hypno 5, the number 5E. So they replaced the S in their name with the 5 for some reason, probably for search engines, so that you know, if you Google it, you'll find the band. And their album, not sure how to pronounce it, maybe Sheol or Sheol. It's Sheol. And this is progressive metal with some post-metal influences as well, but it's much heavier than the last two that I mentioned, much more extreme and avant-garde. It's the 6th album by this French band. I'm surprised I never listened to an album by them before. It's right up my alley, really good. If you're a fan of bands like The Ocean, you'll like this. My main critique that I have with this that kind of keeps it from being a perfect album for me is that they did a bit too much spoken word on this. There's several spoken word passages throughout the album. They're mostly in French. However, the lyrics for the singing and screaming passages seem to be mostly in English. And I'm very particular about when I enjoy spoken word in music. I think there's only a handful of bands who I enjoy spoken word from. So you pretty much have to be Between the Buried and Me, Dream Theater, King Gizzard and the Lizard Wizard, or Sixth for me to be happy to hear or even slightly tolerant of that much spoken word. However, this is still my favorite album of February 2023, and it's currently in my top 5 of the year, a strong contender, if not already a certainty, for my year-end top 40. And that's it for my top 10 albums of February 2023. Let me know if I missed anything awesome in the metal, rock, and progressive music genres, or even something in a tangential genre that you think I'd like. Leave any suggestions down in the comments, and I'll be sure to check them out. And stay tuned for my recap of March at the end of March, or my weekly updates throughout the weeks where I talk about what's new and give my first impressions of what I've been listening to. Till next time, peace out.